Welcome to Crime and Controversy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Crime and Controversy with Angela Wood and Rose Feller. I'm Matt Skye. Angela has worked as a defense attorney on countless trials, from misdemeanors to homicides, and Rose Feller is a dedicated criminal defense lawyer with over 20 years of experience. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge and insights into criminal justice cases and the legal strategies. Angela, Rose, thanks for joining.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So let's get into our topic of the day, Robert Durst and the Jinx. Maybe, Angela, give us a background on this case for people who don't remember. It's been a hot minute.
It has been. So Robert Durst was the son of a famous Durst family, big real estate family in New York, probably one of the largest in the country. He's actually the oldest son. He had obviously some legal issues come up. He was accused really formally of two murders, the first of Morris Black and then the second of Susan Berman. He was never officially charged with the death or disappearance of his first wife, Katherine McCormack, but evidence, and I think most people who knew Robert or any facts surrounding any of the cases think that he was the one responsible for her disappearance.
So I found the Durst issue very interesting because he admittedly killed the first individual, Mike. And when he killed him, he dismembered him. You have to be a very special human being to be okay dismembering somebody. And I think that really sticks out for me as it goes along and you follow Mr. Durst in his life. You know, the other thing that stuck out with me with Mr. Durst was the fact that in the second episode, I think, of his documentary that he did with Netflix, he mentions that he was complicit in the death of his first wife. And where he was never formally charged with that, complicit by definition means wrongdoing. And so he admits that he had wrongdoing as it applies to his first wife. So to me, it was very telling that he had a significant role to play.
He lied to police so many times, right? So he says he dropped his first wife off at the train station after they have a fight, whether it was physical or not. The story kind of changes. But then he says he dropped her off and then went to have a drink with his neighbor. He testified he told officers and the documentary actually that wasn't true. And he figured, if I just give police a story, they'll go away. But there were a lot of holes in that story specifically. And I wonder if, because he was such a big name in the community, or at least his family was, if that had any possible sway in the investigation, or I guess the lack thereof, because there really wasn't much of any, right? So there was a call to her medical school where she was going during this time period, and somebody called in pretending to be sick, but nobody did much more of an investigation on that call other than that. Perhaps it was the change in technology, right, from the 70s to today, but they really just looked under the hood, went, okay, it looks great, and left it alone.
But let's be real here for a second. And after all of the stuff that as women we've had to do to get where we are today, in the 70s, a woman who got to go to university to become a doctor, she's on her first day of rounds, she's going to call in and, excuse me, say she had, quote unquote, diarrhea. No woman's going to, no, first of all, no woman's going to say that. Second of all, no woman's not going to show up for work on the very first day. I don't care if you're there with an IV bag dragging yourself around. You're going to make sure you're there because you're making a mark and you're being invited to a place where normally women weren't allowed.
Right. And then she was supposed to have, I think, lunch or dinner with one of her friends, and she missed that. And that's what got the ball rolling on where did she even go. So after the family finds out she's missing, the brother goes to the Durst residence and sees that Durst has gotten rid of all of Kathleen's things. They're all just out there. Everything's gone. That's you don't do that if you're expecting somebody to come back.
Or hoping they come back. You're going to preserve it to show you had faith, that you missed them, that you were hoping they'd come back.
He doesn't have that filter though, man.
Well, and he lied, literally everything that came out of his mouth. And don't forget, at the end of the documentary, he's in the bathroom and he's still got that recorder on. And he's in there going, man, they got me. I'm in trouble.
That's the famous moment that we all see over and over again. That's a very iconic. Yeah.
And then he went outside and you could tell he thought he was going to be arrested right then and there. He was like...
Well, he wasn't sure. He kind of mumbled that. He wasn't sure who'd be waiting for him, who wouldn't be.
But it was the letter, remember, the cadaver letter. And just so for people who don't know, the cadaver letter is something that was sent to police after they found the body of before they found the body of Susan Berman. It's actually what led them to the discovery. The letterhead was very different. It was block letters and it misspelled Beverly and it added an extra E. The reason why that's important is because, well, a few reasons. One, Durst said that whomever wrote that letter was in fact responsible for Berman's death. And the second reason is because he actually sent a letter to Berman's son with the same misspelling. And that's what led the people who are doing the documentary to say it must be Durst.
Let's zoom out for a second. I'm curious to get your takes on how the documentary maybe impacted the public perception of this investigation. This is a rare situation where you actually have everything developing in real time. Maybe start with Angela and then we'll jump to Rose.
Well, most of the time documentaries get there after the fact. They have 2020, which is great, but there's no real additional insight. In this case, it was a lot different, right? You had the director who actually had a good relationship with Durst. You could tell that by the way that they communicate with each other. And then the fact that they have this letter, they don't tell law enforcement, right? They actually told the prosecutor on OJ. I forgot her name. Her name is slipping my mind, but that's the person that they actually went to and told they had this letter before they told law enforcement. And so what they do in this documentary is they say, hey, Robert, do you know what this letter is? He identifies it. He identifies the misspelling. He identifies the block letters. And then they show him the cadaver letter and it's a match. And right then and there, he's done. Like, checkmate. You do not collect go. You do not collect $200. You go to jail. And it wasn't soon after that that law enforcement arrested him. But that never happens with a documentary. It's always just from the outside looking in. This was like in the eye of the hurricane, so to speak.
The only thing I can think of is maybe making of a murder, right? Is that, if I'm saying that correctly, right? Netflix had a bit of that dynamic, whereas proceedings are still going on.
Yeah, but they didn't break the case open, right? There was nothing really new. They did a little bit more digging, but this was like taking a bulldozer to the investigation. It was something that nobody had thought about, which is weird because that cadaver letter was so important. It was like, checkmate, you're done. And it seems like law enforcement didn't, and maybe they did, and we don't know.
I don't agree. I don't agree that the cadaver letter was checkmate, you're done.
It was the same handwriting with the same misspelling.
But wait a minute. Well, no. I didn't say it didn't show that he did it.
Okay.
But I don't think, like he said, and you keep saying, going back to, well, they say the cadaver letters, the gist of it all, and that's what connects them. Listen, that guy was in California. They proved he was in California days before. He could have very well have gone by his friend's house. You don't know if they were romantic or not. He was giving her money. He was help supporting her in a bad time. There was never any answer about one or the other. And she loved him. And because you have to remember, in one of them where she admits to her friend that she made that phone call about the wife disappearing, she said, why would you do that? And she said, the things you do for love. So that sounds like a woman in love with a man. So anyway, he could have stopped by there and he could have seen that she's dead. And he could have felt bad for her friend. And he could have been smart enough to know, crap, they're going to connect me again. It doesn't mean he did it. It means he was there. So he's a suspect, but damn, that man's a suspect no matter what.
I mean, that's what he told the jury, though, and they came back pretty quick.
But he says that he feels that was it. I don't think that way because I think anybody could have stopped by. For me, that's not the nail in the coffin. He has much other bigger nails in his coffin than just the letter.
But like the mic, that was definitely not his finest moment. And I'm sure if he was here today, he would say, I regret that. You know, I wish I didn't speak into a live mic. But that didn't.
Why didn't an attorney say he had a mental health issue? Because anybody who talked like that to himself sounds like they're schizophrenic.
It's whether or not he knew what he was doing at the time was wrong or right. He wrote a letter to law enforcement. He covered his tracks. Then he lied. Then he ran.
Yeah. Which person did it? Was it him or one of his other personalities?
It's still him. It's consciousness of guilt.
It doesn't matter. It's different repercussions for your actions.
I mean, how are you going to... He has this history of people dying or disappearing.
So listen, I wouldn't sign up to be his friend. His friends find Pero real quick. But it doesn't mean that letter was the end-all be-all nail for him. I felt he had much more difficult hurdles to overcome in life. I think very clearly, I didn't even think that he killed his friend until the part of the documentary where he was on the bike. It's the criminal defense attorney in me. I got to tell you, I was like, yeah, maybe not. And then I was a little disappointed when I heard him talk about it to himself.
Yeah. I mean, he was likable, right? Like, he was, but that's what made
Well,
his.
that's how we got that juror to go destroy all that evidence. And who gets a juror to destroy evidence
And they're
for that?
friends. They're friends.
Who does that?
I mean, Rob Durst.
He's
like,
very interesting.
And then that one best friend that he had, the guy who did like the country porn music, that guy. And there was an alleged confession at a restaurant too with that guy's wife.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, so she's much shorter, but she was all about his guilt. The singer was a little bit more, I guess, apprehensive, but I mean, she clearly knew something.
What do you think were the critical forensic challenges in prosecuting the Robert Durst case? Because you have this media circus, you have a very complicated dynamic.
They didn't have any. To the wife, there's no body. With Morris Black, he admits it, right? So he gets found, I guess, not guilty of the murder, but not because he didn't commit it. It was because he had a legal defense. And he admits to cutting up the body. So you don't need any physical evidence there, right? And they were neighbors, so it wouldn't shock anybody if even if his DNA was found in Morris Black's home. That wouldn't be weird. And then with Berman, I mean, at the time there wasn't a ton of forensics, and even if there were, they were best friends, like Rose was pointing out. It wouldn't be crazy for any DNA to be there. I think if they had this literal smoking gun with his DNA on it and gunpowder residue on his hands, that would be it. But it was really his lies and his inability to shut up which led to him being convicted.
I got to tell you, though, still, I thought maybe that the Mafia was involved because from the age of 12 with her father, him being in the Mafia, I don't see, this is where I had a hard time, and this is where I thought he was innocent until he told on himself. I really don't see the Mafia not taking revenge on him if he killed one of their more higher up boss's daughters, even if he had died when she was 12. There is a sense of loyalty, honor among thieves. I'm not part of the Mafia. I don't know the Mafia, but they're very tight oriented and they're based on loyalty. And if you hurt them, they take 5 of yours. So to go and to commit a murder to kill that woman, even with her father dying at the age of 12, I found that very suspicious that they didn't try to do something to Durst. The reason that pulled me back is because apparently Susan and her friend were going to make a tell-all about the Mafia. So then in my head, my thoughts became, well, maybe Durst took care of a problem that the Mafia had already seen coming. So maybe that's why they left him alone. But that to me was just a little bit suspicious, again, until I heard the confession in the bathroom.
Well, let me ask you also about potential corruption and mishandling of evidence by law enforcement. How do you think that factors in?
I think it goes to the first case, candidly, the most. I mean, his wife disappears and they go, oh, he lied. It's okay. That's fine. They didn't even, they originally, I think the award that the Durst family put out was $100,000, and then they cut it to $15,000. They just didn't do anything. Oh, she's gone. And then because they had domestic issues, the police go, well, I guess she would run away. When her entire family says that's not who she is. She left everything behind. So I think it was the amount of money and power that the family had, especially in the 70s, where police corruption, I think, was a little bit, played a bigger role. Not that it doesn't play a role today, it certainly does. But it was harder to catch them, I think, back in the 70s.
Well, we're a capitalist society, Angela. And you and I both know people who pay us a little bit more give us more to get them more.
Yes.
And we have extra hours to delve into certain issues. And this was a trial fraught with no evidence, all circumstantial. There was a lot of holes to run down to show reasonable doubt in all of these cases.
You think there was reasonable doubt with Berman?
Oh, no, but he had self-defense.
Oh, with Morris Black?
Yeah, Black had self-defense because said he was attacked by him. With Susan Berman, I feel for her, again, remember, I didn't think he was guilty of her for a while. They're giving him money back and forth. They were visiting. She lied for him. But that was the problem. See, that's where I think might have tipped it. She was just about ready to go talk to the New York law enforcement officers. I think it was, the next week or two? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, he maybe felt she couldn't shut up. That could be an issue.
Yeah, I think the same thing happened with Black, right? It's people who can't shut up. It's people he can't control, where he loses it, and it's well, I guess they're dead now, and nothing's going to happen. But it's weird, because normally with people who have multiple bodies, who have killed multiple times, they get better at it. Here, he did the best job with Kathleen, right? Nothing. She just, according to him, gets on a train and bounces.
So, but by definition, he's a serial killer. And that was an interesting statement you made, because all of the training I have had with serial killers, they actually do what you just said. They improve on the way that they kill, but they also kill in the same way, or they get it a little bit better. That doesn't seem to be what happens with Durst. He does it for opportunity. Yeah. So his, I think, is more temper related rather than the actual serial killers who have the craving for the kill.
Yeah, and if you look at the depositions of his family, especially his younger brother, his temper was very well known. He had a history of domestic violence, especially with Kathleen. There were a number of instances where she went to the emergency room with broken or fractured bones, with bruises, and she never did anything about it. I mean, that's common, right? Today that happens. Not much has changed with that. But he has a history and a pattern of extreme physical violence. He's just tiny, so he doesn't look all that threatening, but
he's not. That's correct. His small stature takes away from the look of him being able to do
and his voice too. And
that bye-bye creeped me out every time.
I love that. I mean, I don't like what he did, but like, he's an interesting person, not just because of the crimes, but the fact that he got arrested for the petty theft when he went on the run, the amount of times he went on the run, the people who helped him go on the run.
He's looking for a thrill. The only reason he steals a $6 hoagie is because he's looking for a cheap thrill somewhere to see if he can do it. And he couldn't do it. That's the problem. Yeah. And he admitted a lot that he would abscond. I can't believe he got bond on the second case, because he was so openly admitted how he was just taken off. Yep, no seizing of his money, none of his assets. That's the capitalist society we live in. Yeah. Because he had the money, his life was much easier as he was applied to these charges.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, how many times do you have to go on the run before, a court says, not this time? And then, too, we didn't really touch on the fact that when his verdict on Berman was read, he wasn't even there.
You don't have to be there, because once the jury's sworn, the defendant can come and go. But I believe he should have been there too. I thought that was a little off, but I think that was because of COVID.
Yeah, so he wasn't feeling well, and he had come into contact with somebody who had COVID, but his attorneys didn't even tell him the verdict right away.
As we just wrap up, I'm just curious to get both of your takes on the Robert Durst case and, of course, Morris Black as well. What do you think are the key takeaways as we reflect back on this?
I mean, with Morris, apparently you can admit to murder. I mean, that's cool as long as you said he started it. I mean, ignore the fact that I cut up the body, hid it, and then tried to pretend like I was never here. I was also dressed in drag and pretended to be a mute. You should put all of that aside, because I said he started it. I mean, I think it depends on the state you're in, right? Like, I don't think that would fly in Brooklyn, candidly. But I think it would fly in a jurisdiction like Florida or Texas, where that has, in fact, worked many times.
Yeah, but Texas, so first of all, in Florida, we have the right to stand your ground. My issue with him was his rationale for the dismemberment of that body was because he was afraid of law enforcement. Yeah. But Texas is the only state outside of Florida that gives you such Second Amendment rights. And in Texas specifically, I'm not a Texas attorney, but if you talk about that spring gun case that's famous for us that we use with the Supreme Court, they outline exactly where and where you cannot go with a firearm. And if he was in his house like he said he was, there was no reason just to shoot and kill him and call 911.
No, I mean, Morris Black had this reputation for being a pain in the butt, but I mean, he was also working at a charity for people who couldn't afford eyeglasses, so he wasn't all bad.
Let me ask you a question about this. This is a little interesting with Durst dressing up like a woman and pretending he was mute, because it didn't just go for that moment there. That's who they rented the property to. A female, mute, deaf was who they said they rented that property to.
Yeah.
Maybe because this was his first kill, he went to great lengths. But for me, that would have a lot of premeditation.
But it's not his first kill, right? Because he killed Kathleen first. Because Kathleen happened in, was it like 76? No, 82. Sorry, 82.
Allegedly killed her first.
So let's get each of your final takeaways on this as we sort of wrap for this one. Robert Durst case. We'll start with Angela. What's a key takeaway for our audience thinking about cases like this?
Don't talk to police or people who do documentary.
Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut is the advice. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Crime and Controversy with Angela Wood and Rose Feller. For more information or to connect with our panel, visit feller-law.com. And it's about justice dismemberment.law. Angela, Rose, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.